All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and we've been talking jQuery, and I've pretty much come to the end of our presentation here. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about a couple things with jQuery plugins. As you can see, the actual site for this, and I probably haven't been doing a good enough job of keeping these URLs here for you, but there's the URL. It's just https://plugins.jquery.com. When you go out there, you'll notice that there are approximately, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, maybe 2,500 or so plugins. And these are all basically, for lack of better words, you might call them code snippets or whatever, that people have created that they put out there for free for you to be able to use. All right. In addition, there are plugins out there that you can purchase, all right, for either a nominal fee or a lot. You can have plugins created for you. You can also go and publish your own plugins. All right. So I'm not going to go through any of this right now, not a bit, but I did want to mention two things. One of the better known plugins is a plugin that's called Validate, and it's the jQuery validation plugin. If you go out to the site that's shown right here, again, sorry, I'm kind of deluging you with a bunch of URLs, but if you go out here to https://jQueryvalidation.org, all right, that brings you out to the site right here. There is about a 13-minute long, a little bit less than 13-minute long video on the jQuery validation plugin by a company called Webucator. It's a good company. I've taken courses through them many years ago in the past. But if you listen...
Hi, this is Nat with Validator. In this video, I'm going to show you how to get started validating forms with jQuery validation plugin, which is available at jQueryvalidation.org. I'll be showing you how to use jQuery validation plugin with two different forms.
And that's what he does. In fact, he shows two forms.
A common form, and then a somewhat more complex sign-up form. Then I'll show you how to find additional validation methods and to create your own. And finally, I'll show you how you can localize your message.
Okay, so that's what it's about over 13 minutes. He creates these two forms that you see right here. They're two different ones. A very simple form that does virtually no customized validation. See that? It just says this field is required. Then a more complete form where you get customized error messages. So what I was going to do was to spend a couple minutes and go over each one of these two forms just so you can see what they are, what they're like, etc. So that said, I am not telling you that I made any of this. In fact, I'm telling you I did not make any of this. All right, so I'm going to, and I should have done this ahead of time, I apologize, but I'm going to find this. I think I just call it validation, and I've got some examples in here. I'm only going to go over the first couple. All right, so here's validation example. Let me close a couple of these. So here's the first one. Let me run it, and then we'll go back and we'll take a look at everything that's in there. So this is the first one that the author of that tape that I just showed you made. So notice, name required at least 2 characters, email required, URL is optional, comment required. Well, notice if I press that, I get, well, somehow I screwed up, but this field is required. All right, I'll have to look at that one. Now, notice if I only put in a single character, I get a different message. If I put in an invalid email, I get a different message. If I put an invalid URL in, I get a different message. All right? So you can see I get different messages based on the criteria. But if I come through here and I write Jeff Scott, and I write JP Scott at Rankin.edu, and for the URL, I put http://www.rankin.edu. .edu, and I write this form rocks. All right, if I put all that in where it's all valid and I submit, I just get a message that says it's submitted. All right, so let's go back and let's take a look at all the code, so to speak, that makes this happen. So let me open up from here the CSS file also, and it's screen CSS, and I believe all that does is it imports or includes all the other files. So reset core and the 2 CMX files. Let's bring that up. Whoops. So those are the CSS files right here. Come on. There we go. Again, these are all things that are online. This is the example that's in there. This is basically for the form. Here's a reset, which basically sets everything back to their default values. Here's the core CSS, not a very big file. And here is the template CSS. I'm not going to run through any of those, okay? But what I do want to run through is the stuff that's in here. First thing to notice, and I prettied it up. It was not, didn't look, I guess, as nice, so to speak. All right, when they wrote it. So first, notice, got our HTML tag, our doc type, our HTML tag, our head, a meta tag, which sets our character set, the title. Here's the link in for our external CSS file. Now, as far as our external JavaScript, it's all right here. All right, I guess I probably could have taken this, put it in its own file, and I would think this would still work. I would know no reason why it would not. But I will tell you, this is the big line here. This calls the Validator plugin. Let's try to save this. And I'll save it out here, and I'll save it into my JS, and I'll just put it in there as how about validate.js? Okay, I'll just leave it like that. Then I will take what's in the actual file here, and let's comment this out. And we'll come in here, and we will, I guess I already did have one. I don't know what's in there, but let's just put in here validate.js. All right. Now, I don't know if this will work or not, but let's check. No, now we're getting the HTML validation. So for some reason, it's not doing the validation correctly. All right. So you see, I'm still getting validation, but I'm getting HTML validation. For some reason, it's not JS validate. JS validate. Not sure again what the problem is. So let's just go back. We'll close that and this, and I'll go back and take, whoops. What I just put in here, doggone it. And I will uncomment it. Again, not sure what the problem is there, but there's some kind of a problem. It might be as simple as just going back and taking this file right here and putting it at the bottom. As we go on, though, you'll notice, again, I'm using the example that they used. So they added some additional internal CSS in here. Now I believe in this example, this simple example, we've got a comment form. So all that is needed, but we're not doing anything with the sign-up form. That's in the second example. So I believe I can get rid of all this in this newsletter. I think I can get rid of all that, and this should still work just fine. So let's try it. And you see that it does. All right. Now we'll go back and we'll look at why that comment field, maybe I didn't put the word required in there. I don't know. So when you add what needs to be added here, I want to mention you must add the jQuery file before you add the jQuery validate, because the jQuery validate uses some stuff from the jQuery file. All right. So this brings us right out to the site I just showed you. It's a jQuery validation demo. All right. This is the text they had there. So the form is called comment form, and it uses the class CMX form, which is in the CSS I just showed you. All right. So if you look, we've got what? Name, minimum length of 2. All right. It's text and it's required. Then we've got email, type email. Name should be here, C email. Always should make sure that your name, your ID and your name are the same. ID and name are the same. ID and name are the same. They're not. Boy, oh boy. At least I'm consistently inconsistent. What did I just do? What I was trying to show you, and not very well, is that sometimes when you come in here and you put your stuff right after one another, it makes it much easier to see what was with what and if you missed something. All right, ID and name, CC comment. All right, that all looks good. All right, so if you look for the comment, it does say required. So why is it picking that up? Your comment required. I have absolutely no idea why it's not picking that up in the validator, but let's keep going. So they put everything inside of p tags. So we've got a label for the name, ID and the name. The minimum length is 2 and the type is text and it's required. Then we have the label for the email, which is also required. The input tag, ID is C email, type is email. We could have used text there, but again, we're getting some extra HTML5 validation by saying type equal email. The URL, which was not required. All right. There's our label. There's our input. And notice it again, it's of type, this is of type URL. Our email is of type email. Our name is just of type text. And then our comment is a text area. All right. ID, name, required. And then we've just got our button. So the magic, again, so to speak, happens in here. If everything worked, it comes across and it says submitted. But what it does is it calls the validate function. The validate function is inside of the validator. So let's take a very quick look at that. This validate, that isn't it. So let's see, where are we getting that from? We're getting this from a CDN. All right. What does that mean? Well, if I wanted to, and I had done this earlier, I had come out here and I had actually downloaded all of this. All right. And I believe if I go to dist, there's the jQuery validate min file. So if I open this, in fact, let's open the non-compressed one. All right. And let's search for validate. All right. So this is the function that's being called. And you'll notice it's not a small function. That was validate. There also is a valid function, a rules function. We're going to look at some of this stuff in just a couple minutes. All right, this is not a small file. All right, over 1,500 lines. All right, so I added the minified version of that, and then, well, first I added jQuery and then the minified version of that. All right, but again, the takeaway here is, all right, and I'm trying to figure out why, because that's required, why that's not giving me an error message, but it's not. So again, if I put in something here that's less than 2 characters, not there, that's less than 2 characters, notice you get that. If I put in a non-valid email, you get that. If you put in a non-valid URL and you submit, you get that. You only get that for the URL because it's optional. But again, as long as I come in here and I put in valid stuff, oops. Now what's interesting is if I click submit, it says submitted, so it's definitely not recognizing what we have here for the comments. So that's either a bug that I put in, but I don't think I did, or it's a bug in the program itself. All right, let's take a look at the second example, which is a little more extensive, and it's a little more extensive because it allows you to create customized error messages. Now, everything that you see up until here, that's all the same. All that's the same. I've got a different script file that I use, and we'll look at that in just a minute. This is all, it's a different form. There's a first name, a last name, a username, a password, confirm password, an email, and there's a few other things. All right, so let's take a look at what that looks like. All right, now notice if I click submit, what happens? Hopefully you can see this. Let me blow it up a little. We get customized error messages. So it says, please enter your first name. All right. And you'll notice that as soon as I enter something, okay, and in fact, if I come in here and put in Jeff Scott, and I move here, it automatically has code that suggests a username by concatenating the two together with a period. Now, notice if I put in a password, it's supposed to be at least 5 characters. So if I put in just a 1, your password must be at least 5 characters long. Your password must be at least 5 characters long. Now here, they don't match, as you can tell, 5 characters and 4 characters. And if I click submit, your password must be at least 5 characters long. I guess we didn't have a matching one. But we're going to look at these in just a minute. AWD1000. Now I only marked 1 here. It says select at least 2. So it says you must select at least 2. And boom, now everything's submitted. So let's look at the magic, so to speak, that made this one work. All right. These are using what are called rules. There's rules and there's messages. So this says when we are validating our sign-up form, first of all, run the validate function. And when you are validating it, here are your rules. Now, it looks a little funky, but it really makes a lot of sense when you start to break it down. All right? The first name field is required. The last name field is required. Those are just by themselves. Then the username, they broke this up to make it look like an object. They said for the username, required is true by saying this. That's as if we said username required like that. All right? But we also wanted to add another rule. The minimum length is 2. Now notice there's a comma after the first one, not a comma after the second one. In fact, if you put a comma in, it doesn't work. You break the whole thing. But in between every rule set, we need a comma, except, in fact, even at the end of our rules, we need a comma. All right, so we're saying the first name is required, the last name is required, the username is required with a length of 2. The password is required. It has a minimum length of 5. The confirm password is true, or it's required rather. It's got a minimum length of 5, and it must be equal to the password up above. The email is required, and not just, here, notice email true, so it must be of type email. That topic thing that's down there has a minimum length of 2. That means, if you remember, we had to choose at least 2 topics. Agree is required, meaning, again, you have to check that to say that you agree with their terms and conditions. Those are the rules. Each set of rules ends with a comma. When we are all done with our rules, because this whole thing is a set of rules followed by a set of messages. So when I'm done with my rules, that has to have a comma at the end. You'll notice when I get all done, there's no comma here. All right, so here's our messages. What this says in English is, since this was a required field, if you don't put anything in there, that's what it should say. So notice if I change this to first name and a first name and a user name, all right, and how about valid password? Please provide a valid password. Email, please provide a valid email address. Please accept our legal policy. And please select a minimum of 2 topics. So I changed all that stuff. I come back here, I run it again, I click submit, and notice first name has now got the space, last name, username, valid password, valid email address, accept our legal policy. All right. In fact, let's undo that. Please select a minimum of 2 topics. So I can change the verbiage in there any way that I want to. But, so those are our messages. Hopefully just looking at that makes sense. So these 2 are going to fire if one or both of these fields are, since they're required, are left off. Will fire if we leave off the name period. This should fire if we don't have at least 2 characters. This if we don't have anything at all. This if our password is less than 5 characters. This, again, if we put nothing in there at all. This if it's less than 5 characters. This fires if the 2 passwords are not the same. This fires if we put in an invalid email address. This fires if we don't check the thing to accept the legal policy because it was required. And this if we select that checkbox and we don't have at least 2 topics. So what are we doing? Well, this code, as it says here, and this is their code, propose the username by combining the first and the last name. So what this says, if I get to the username, so my focus is placed there, check to see if, grab whatever value's in the first name, grab whatever value's in the last name. And if there's nothing in there already, and there's something in the first name and the last name, just put in the first name, dot the last name, and that's what you'll use to fill up the username. This doesn't appear to be working because, like it says, that's supposed to hide that topic selection, and it doesn't work. I don't know what the problem is. All right, so all I tried to show you here, and all this was meant to do was to get you started. And I would strongly suggest that you go out to jQueryvalidation.org and watch the video. I do want to mention one last thing, and that is in the video, they mention some URLs. And the URLs that they mention have been changed, okay, since they've done them. The first one is valid, but I want to go to this URL here. When this package was written, they provided minimal types of documentation. But if you look now under the documentation, there's a lot of different plugin methods and a list of validation methods and a bunch of stuff, a lot more than used to be on here. All right? Again, if you have an interest. Secondly, this add method, this is how you add your own method into the jQuery validator. So this is how you add your own validation method. The URL has changed, so the one that is in the video is incorrect. The one I just put here will get you to right here, the add method. So the one I gave you is correct, the one in blue. Also, if you want to use localization, and in the video they show you how to do that, they just put in a single line and then the error messages come out in Spanish, just as an example, so you can make it local for the country that you're working in. That one is also wrong, but if you use the one that I showed you, it shows you all the different languages. So again, I'll leave that up there for a moment, but this is valid, and that's the way I think it is shown in the book. These two are now valid, but what is shown in the video, I shouldn't say the book, what is shown in the video is invalid. All right? Now this was just meant to be an introduction. What we're going to do next is we're going to start looking, I believe, at some Bootstrap. Okay? So I'll be back with that shortly.